in pursuit of health and wisdom. Sapio with Buck Joffrey.
Welcome back to Sapio with Buck Joffrey. I'm Buck Joffrey, and here with my friend and colleague, Alan Viglione. Once again, Alan,
hey,
welcome back to the show. Alan,
great
of
to be
course,
back.
is a practicing internist at
Mhm,
Montecito Concierge Medicine here in Montecito, California.
mhm.
And Alan, today we're going to talk, we actually got some questions from the audience. We have I guess, a critical mass of shows that we've actually done. We've gone through all of the
Yeah.
pillars of longevity as we see them. And I actually went to my Wealth Formula audience, actually, because that's where my email list is. I don't have one for Sapio
Yeah.
quite yet.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, guys, if you're listening, what kinds of questions do you have? And so we got some really good ones. By the way, how are you?
I'm good. Now I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to re-engage the topics. So let's
Yeah,
have some fun.
yeah, cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just get into these questions right off the bat because I think there's some really good ones, and it might take a little bit of time to get through some of these. So, the first one is from OJ Kwan. Now he says, "Hey Buck, I've been listening to the podcast, and I have a question. Can you guys uh, give some advice?" Hold on, we'll get back to that on how to prevent the
Mm-hmm.
dawn effect or rise of sugar levels during sleep or early morning. I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and I do notice that the blood sugar levels go up a lot during this time. Thanks. And then a follow-up question, I asked him just a few more details. It sounds like he is a pre-diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
His hemoglobin A1C is 5.9. And
Mm-hmm.
we could talk a little bit about what that means again as a review. It gets up to 170.
Yep.
He only eats one meal a day. He tried eating earlier at 6 p.m. to see if that morning blood glucose would
Mm-hmm.
go down, and it doesn't work. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
what do you do? First of all,
Yeah.
let's remind everybody of this. It's
Yeah.
very important. Although we are physicians,
Mm-hmm.
we have medical degrees, we're licensed physicians. This is not medical advice. Now, that's the
Correct.
opposite of a lot of podcasts where they are neither physicians,
And- or I should say neither physicians, right? But they give medical
but
advice.
there's a lot
Yes.
of medical advice. So this is not medical advice, but this
Yeah.
is just, listen to this stuff,
Yeah,
consult with your doctor.
exactly. I would say
Okay.
this is guidance,
Okay,
and we're here to
so
talk it out.
so let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So first of all, what's this dawn effect that OJ Kwan's talking about?
Yeah. So what he's talking about is the hyperglycemic, so the glycemic spike, sugar goes up. This is quite common. This is not unusual by any means, but when you're sleeping, and there are a couple different reasons for that. I mean, I should kind of preface that by saying there's also an opposite effect called the Somogyi effect, where it dips down. But what happens is you're sleeping and you're basically, if you have a CGM monitor on, the alarm goes off and it says you're hyperglycemic or hypoglycemic. Now, the dawn phenomena is when your cortisol goes up. I mean, this can happen due to stress. This can happen if you're
Well,
dreaming,
it naturally happens too,
and
right?
it
You have
naturally
a
happens.
morning in the morning, your cortisol level gets up as your body's sort of preparing to
Part of their
wake up.
circadian rhythm.
Hmm.
And that's also one of the theories why cardiac events happen overnight or early in the morning, but it's a natural phenomena.
The cortisol levels naturally going up in the morning as you wake up,
Yeah.
and the dawn effect is that up spike of blood glucose. The
Correct.
Somogyi effect, you're saying, is because insulin is released in response to that, and
Yeah.
then you get this overshoot
Correct.
of insulin, and so all of a sudden the you go from being hyperglycemic, too high blood glucose,
Yeah.
to hypoglycemic, which means too low glucose, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so does that happen in everybody?
Yeah, it does. However, if you're not metabolically optimized or if you have insulin resistance, these things can be exaggerated. And
Okay,
that's an important point. So not
yeah,
everybody goes to 170, but you do have a cortisol spike that makes it go up.
yeah, got it, got it.
Mm,
Okay, so in the case of Joe Cohen,
mm,
it sounds like he's pre-diabetic. He has a
mm,
hemoglobin of A1C. Let's define that again real quick. What's
mm.
um, with A1C, we've have a whole, we've talked a lot about that. In fact, I
Yeah.
talked about, um, if anybody wants to go back to there's a show I did individual on hyperglycemia. It's really useful to really get into what hemoglobin A1C is and all that. But
Hmm.
by definition, let's define A1C. A1C is basically it's a way of tracking blood sugar over a period of time, usually about 3 months at a time.
Yeah, correct.
And 5.9, what's diabetic? What's pre-diabetic again?
Yeah, the numbers that are in any internist's head, 6.5 and 5.9. I'm sorry, 5.7 is pre-diabetic.
5.7 is pre-diabetic.
5.7. So 5.6 and below, classically, is considered normal. But we've
Okay.
talked over and over again
Yeah.
that even that you have to be.
So he's at
Yeah.
5.9. He's
Yeah.
not a diabetic because 6.5 is considered
Correct,
diabetic. But
correct.
this
It's
is
pre-diabetes.
all really a spectrum of stuff. And he gets up to about 170 in the morning. Tell us what's normal.
Yeah. Well, we want to keep it below 140, 150. I
Mhm.
mean, so that's sort of, and so normal, remember, I mean, you naturally do have these variations. We want to keep you in the range of like 100 to 140. That's metabolic optimization.
Mhm. So if
Mm.
for say somebody who doesn't have problems
Mm.
like Jaquan here in terms of pre-diabetes, you wouldn't
Yeah.
really expect the what to really ever go over
You know,
140 or what?
I mean, that's a really good question, Buck. I mean, I've been surprised more often than not. Remember, like when we look at normal, those are 3-month averages, A1C, or fasting blood sugars that are less than 100, normal. But even the normal range, we do see these spikes that tend to go up and down. And this is fine this is the reason why we do recommend CGMs even in normal people, because you can uncover interesting things. But, you know, kind of hang your hat on that normal generally is between 100 to 140, with some variations, of course, after meals and things like that.
Okay, so going back to
Yeah.
Jaquan, he's done a lot of different things to try to help.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention he does take metformin at night as well. So
Yeah.
he's on metformin. He's essentially sounds like he's doing some form of intermittent fasting with
Yeah.
one meal a day. It still still doesn't seem to be helping. In your
Yeah.
practice, if Jaquan comes in with this information, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So, great question. Number one, he's on metformin. You can tweak the dose of the metformin, but even before that, you know, I'd ask a detailed history. Tell me all about your lifestyle. Tell me what you're eating. You know, are you eating the right stuff? Alcohol is toxic to gluconeogenesis, and gluconeogenesis is the process that where your liver puts out sugar, and that can affect your spikes and your dips. So I see your wheels spinning.
No,
Yeah.
my wheels are spinning on this
Yeah.
because let's just be clear. So gluconeogenesis is the process of well, you explain it. What is
Yeah.
gluconeogenesis?
Gluconeogenesis is when your body takes glycogen stored in your
Right.
liver and mobilizes it into your bloodstream.
Yeah. So
So,
if it's toxic to that, then there would
yeah.
be less blood sugar in your.
So take it one step beyond that. So then what happens when your blood sugar swings down? Glucagon goes up,
Uh-huh.
and this is your body's response. So you mentioned the dawn phenomena, and I pulled in the Somogyi effect simply because they go hand in hand. It's your body's way of trying to create homeostasis. But if you're hyperglycemic, which is ultimately the question, the dawn phenomena, then you really got to ask the questions surrounding metabolic health and alcohol, sleep. We talked about sleep in detail too. In patients that aren't sleeping properly, they can have misregulation of their glucose dynamics.
Yeah.
1 meal a day, but what's he eating? Some people actually do better from a glycemic stabilization standpoint if you weave in a second meal, right? So this is kind of the concept that we brought up, that like we're bringing up ideas, intermittent fasting, and these are general principles. But the beautiful thing about a CGM is that you can hack, you can tweak, you
Yeah.
can modulate.
But what can he
Mm.
do? I mean, at this
Well,
point, if you're his doctor, okay, and again, theoretical, not medical advice. You said you could tweak the metformin.
Well, so
What else?
you're thinking like a surgeon, right? You're looking at action, whereas I would take a step back and I would ask more questions. So, and that's
I want to
fine.
do something
If
about
you want
this,
to do
Alex.
something, actually, the easiest do, and I love it. I mean, you know, you can actually do both at the same time.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
easiest do without causing hypoglycemia by
Yeah.
overdoing it would be metformin or acarbose, or some of these other medications that can help modulate. Or berberine is a natural supplement that can help
Yeah.
modulate blood sugar.
You got to be
Yeah,
careful with, I
yeah.
think sometimes, like say berberine, if you're on metformin already, um, it has potentially some of the similar mechanisms. So
You should be
just be
mindful.
mindful
I
of that.
agree with you. And
Yeah.
that's actually a very strong point.
Yeah.
The sulfonylureas are classically like glipizide, gliburide, that kind of stuff, combined with, I know this is sort of getting into the medical realm again, but combined with other glucose modulators, including berberine, can run the risk of hypoglycemia. So, from a medical standpoint, I would ask a battery of questions. And
Hmm.
then, you have the solutions, right? We have a couple different options that can bring it down, but sometimes the answer is even simpler. Sometimes the answer is let's review your diet and let's add on something else. And that something else could be like a protein snack, like nuts. It could be removing alcohol or something like that from your regimen, right? So, but
Removing alcohol from your regimen. Yes.
right? So there are so many little variables here that we would probably have to kind of like tease apart.
Okay.
Mm,
So
mhm,
I get it. So it's not
mm.
it's not that easy, is what you're saying. I
Yeah,
wanted at least one actionable thing
yeah, yeah,
that was okay. He's got a big Don effect going on.
yeah,
What? So there's not like one thing there that you can say, "Hey,
yeah.
try this," or
I
maybe, or not
wouldn't.
that, but
I mean, I think
maybe I
that
would
might
try
be.
this.
Yeah, I think that might be the wrong way to go to say try something because,
Yeah,
I mean, it would be great if he was actually here and maybe you want to actually think
yeah,
about
yeah,
something like that, actually have an
yeah,
actual patient. But if he had a little bit higher adiposity or excess belly fat, then I would say maybe a little bit weight loss would help modulate this, get rid of the inflammatory cells. So, but if I did have to say one action item, if we want to go an action item, would be to take your metformin twice a day and see how you do. You got a CGM, you can
yeah,
modulate these things and monitor
yeah.
these things.
You mentioned acarbose. Acarbose
Yeah.
is really only like something you take with meals, though, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know that that would have
It
a
would
an
be with
eff
his one meal. But
huh?
the hormones, remember, there are two different systems that govern our glucose. And the dawn phenomena is just a manifestation of these two systems, right? So one of them is this gluconeogenesis that I mentioned. Patients that have impaired gluconeogenesis run problems because they can't mobilize their glucose. It spazzes out your system. And then your hormones, which is system two, insulin, glucagon, and believe it or not, it even gets more complex than that because thyroid hormone, testosterone, androgens, all this kind of stuff does feed into glucose mobilization for energy and whatnot. So, as an internist and, trying to kind of find root causes of stuff rather
Yeah.
than solutions, I would say optimize the metabolic efficiency, run through with a whole bunch of possibilities, tweak small things, and see where you go. And I think people might be surprised.
Yeah. And this is
Mm,
again a good
mm,
a good time to, I guess,
mm.
promote the idea of continuous glucose monitoring.
Yeah,
I've
I love it.
actually I need to do it myself again. They typically come in like 14-day patches.
Yeah,
And so, I don't feel like I need to have one all the time,
I
but
agree.
it's a good idea, I think, once in a while to check in and say, okay, how am I doing?
I
And again, reevaluate some of the things.
Yeah.
I remember at one time, not one time, but several times, and I've talked to you about this.
Mhm.
Um, I love going in the sauna, but the problem that I have
Yeah.
when I go in, and it's always in the morning, I get these
Mhm.
crazy spikes that are not normal for me because I'm not pre-diabetic.
Mhm.
I think my A1C is right around 5.2, which is our
Right.
target.
Right.
Um, But when I go in the sauna, I'm getting spikes of like 170, that kind of thing. Do you
Yeah.
think do you think that it may have something to do with the timing of me being in the sauna?
That's
Because I usually
interesting.
go in the morning right after a
Yeah.
workout, and if my cortisol levels are high right then
Yeah.
and there,
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting. I mean, yes, we do have this natural, like we even said, like the dawn phenomenon is a natural spike of your cortisol. So maybe it's a time in, maybe it's the workout. Like
yeah,
really, this is your body's way of trying to mobilize glycogen to restore your blood sugar. and then
Yeah,
the
but
numbers go up.
when people are working out vigorously, do you expect their blood glucose to get that high, or is that?
Yeah, I can tell you, I've seen several different scenarios. I've had patients that come in after long runs and they're hypoglycemic, like their body's burning fuel. But if they had, I mean, you're actually just kind of inspired me to recommend CGMs for these patients. But if they had a CGM on, you'd probably see a hypoglycemic event and then a spike because cortisol goes up. But to answer your question, both of them happen. You utilize your macronutrients, glucose gets rapidly utilized, as you
Yeah,
know, and then you get a swing. But to focus on your question, the time of the
yeah.
day may be relevant. The fact that you just worked out probably is relevant. The fact that you probably do this on a fasted
Yes.
system is probably relevant.
Right, because
Yeah.
that's and why is that relevant? Because that's so what you're referring to is the fact that I do intermittent fasting,
Mm.
so I'm not eating before this. So what I'm doing
Yeah.
is I'm waking up maybe about 8:30 or so. I'll be at the gym.
Yeah.
I'll do cardio, try to get my VO2, you know,
Good.
max thing going on.
I like how
Like
you're weaving in prior
yeah,
concepts.
yeah, yeah. Get my level 2 exercise thing going on, or
Yeah.
I'll go for a hike or whatever, and
Yeah.
then if I go then that's when I'll go to the sauna. So I'm
Yeah.
already revving up,
Yeah.
right? I've already made it so my body's got a bunch of blood sugar mobilizing, and then I'm giving it this punch in the sauna, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah,
say exactly what's causing it, but the beautiful thing is that you can be your own scientist and you can isolate these variables,
yeah.
right? So like we can have some fun with it. Like
I
what
could
if
take alcohol away from my regimen. Is that what you're
your
suggesting?
morning alcohol?
So,
Do you remember from medical school the cage questions? So like if you're asking if someone has a problem,
right.
right? If
Yeah,
you have a
yeah.
problem with alcohol, do you wake up and reach for that
No.
alcoholic beverage?
Well, no, I don't, but I do like a glass of wine or two at night. So, I
Mm.
know it's not actually part of the longevity regimen, but at the same time, I also want to have some fun in my
And
life. I'm
that's what
like,
it's about.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. So, do you feel like so have we covered that question? I mean,
I think we
do you have
try
anything
to. I
else?
think it's highly layered, and we can do a follow up on that if there's anything missing. But I think the concepts we put out there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say OJ Kwame, maybe we should this could be something that if you're interested, we could record, if we could get more information from you and do a follow up on this. But I think it
Yeah,
sounds to me like, your potential options there are to talk to your doctor about some different medications, different
yeah,
timing on your food.
yeah,
What about working out at different times too? That's another
yeah,
thing I wondered a little bit about.
yeah. Working out late it
Yeah.
can actually help the dawn phenomena. By the
Yeah,
way,
that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
yeah. But you want to be a little mindful of working out late and staying up and crunching your
Right.
sleep pattern,
Yeah, yeah.
which can exacerbate the
Right,
dawn phenomena.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that's
Mm,
good. All right, next
mm.
question here is somebody who is asked to be anonymous, although it's not a particularly concerning question in terms of,
Confidentiality or
anything
whatnot.
confidential or
Yeah,
weird, but he just doesn't want the fame and the recognition that this
that's
show
it.
provides.
Well said.
Okay, so he says, "Hey Buck, how are you? Would you mind discussing these supplements, please?" Basically, question is, they're supposedly Geroprotectant, myth or truth? Thanks. Love your new podcast. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to go through these, and then I'll give you I'll give my take,
And
and
I can
then if you
comment
have
on your
anything
take.
to add on it,
Sounds great.
be great. Okay, so the first one he's talking about is nicotinamide riboside, which is known as NR. So NR, this is a naturally occurring vegetables, things like that. You get it's a B3, vitamin
Hmm.
B3 derivative. But basically, this whole thing, NR is part of this whole precursor to NAD plus. Okay,
Right.
NAD plus is the multi-billion-dollar industry right now with
Hmm.
NR, NMN. You have these big companies called Elysium, and
Hmm.
some of these other ones that are out there that are marketing this stuff. The idea is based on NAD plus. NAD plus is required. It's a required molecule for us in our bodies
Yeah.
for respiration, all sorts of cellular functions. Without it, you're dead. And what people have noticed in the lab with clinical studies is that as we age, NAD levels go down. And that is a phenomena that that for the most part, a lot of people have focused on because NAD going down presumably has some other implications, such as DNA damage not getting repaired, because
Yeah.
DNA damage getting repaired is NAD is required for that. So if you can think about somebody getting
Yep.
older, their chromosomes starting to break down, NR can then NAD can declining levels of NAD can exacerbate that, right?
Yeah.
And
Makes
so
sense.
that's where this science is based around. The thing about NAD is it's a very large molecule that doesn't get into cells easily. So the question is, how do you get any like a large amounts of NAD back into cells? And that's been a focus of a lot of research. People
Yeah.
do get NAD IVs, IV NAD, IV pushes of or IV drips full of NAD in them. I've done them. But the question is, how effective is it? Because we don't know if those molecules they might be too big to actually go into cells. So that's
Yeah.
where these precursors come along. These precursors, namely, as this person mentions, nicotinamide, riboside, and also NMN. Those two are two different precursors. And the idea being that if we can replace some of the raw materials of NAD in the body will go ahead and make more NAD itself. And research at least shows this much, that if you do give the precursors, those NAD levels, even in humans, do seem to go back
Yeah.
up.
They
Now,
rest.
what's the whether that it has the true geroprotective effect, that is not 100% clear. So there's also this role potentially in NR, and then vis-a-vis NR and NAD going up, and also stimulating these pathways that are thought to be involved with geroprotection and longevity, called the sirtuins. So there's that too. Now, one thing that I think is interesting, and I think people should be mindful of, is there are these like really small animal studies out there that have shown that NR in very high doses, and we're talking about like, literally like 100x of what normally would be given in humans. If you give those to animals who have tumors, who have cancer, it can actually accelerate them. Now, that is actually not surprising, because what the role of NAD there is, these tumor cells, they are very metabolically active, so they're going to chew through this stuff. So it's actually not a big surprise to me that that would be the case. And I don't know how much I really worry about that in somebody who's healthy, but I think certainly mindful of that is a possibility. The other thing that I will say is that I've referenced the interventions testing protocol multiple times. This is a series of studies going across the country, sort of simultaneously on the same drugs on mice, to see if there is a benefit to longevity with various drugs. And NR has been in that trial, and it actually has not shown benefit from a geroprotection side. Now, all that aside, the question is, what do I think of it? What do you think of it? That kind of thing. I think that from my perspective, I think the mechanism of action, especially as the thought mechanism of reaction, whether that's related to the sirtuins, DNA repair mechanisms, that kind of thing, I think they're pretty compelling. And to me, the risk of taking NMN, which is what I take, I don't take NR, just because, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no special reason. But NMN, I take it because I think the mechanism of action is potentially compelling. There is a
Yeah.
fair amount of basic science in that space that shows benefits of increasing NAD, not just in terms of longevity, but also in terms of, um, neurodegeneration and all sorts of stuff like
Exactly.
that. So I actually do take it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so that's where I stand. What do you have to add about
I think
NR, if
that's
anything?
I think that's fabulous. I mean, the word that you use that I resonate with is compelling, and I think the data is compelling enough to do it. I'm not worried about the side effects. I take it also, and I
Yeah.
take NMN. Most people take NR or NMN. You don't need to do both, obviously.
Yeah.
But remember, I mean, the geroprotective or the health span effects, you kind of got to tease apart. I mean, the whole point of this podcast isn't necessarily just to live longer, it's to live
Right.
well.
Right.
And if something can contribute to living well by keeping cognitive function intact or vision intact, or actually um, uh, protecting highly metabolic cells of our body, I use brain and eyes as an example, liver cells, there are a lot of different examples of this and a lot of different theories of what NAD can actually help. I think it's compelling enough to sign on. And then we just collect more data as it comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to
Absolutely.
piggyback on what you said too, the ITP did not show geroprotective effects. It did not show life extension in lab animals.
I don't think that that should necessarily be the litmus test of whether or not it's worth taking something, because to
Yeah,
your point,
I
there's
agree.
other benefits that there may be that may not necessarily directly link to longevity, but they may increase health span.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know. Nobody knows in reality which of these um, are actually going to make a big difference or not. But that's
Mm-hmm.
the precursors of NAD, NR, NMN. I think, from
Yeah.
my perspective, are potentially worth it.
Yep.
Next one, you're just talking about is quercetin. So quercetin, you don't hear about that one as much, but basically it's antioxidative sort of molecule. It's got lots of different potential roles. It is it's an antioxidant, as I mentioned. It also has some effects on protein folding. We've talked about that before when
Mm-hmm. Right.
when proteins don't fold right, they create messes and aggregates of proteins, and then that
Mm-hmm.
creates diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. It may also increase NAD levels. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing with quercetin, as I understand it, is its role as a senolytic.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so what is senolytic? What do I mean by senolytic? Senescent cells, again, as a review, are these zombie cells that are in the in your body. And basically what happens is that normally cells go through this process of, living for a period of
Mm-hmm.
time, maybe they replicate and then they go off and die, and that's normal. Senescent cells, they'll stop replicating and then they'll just kind of hang around and be zombie cells, right? And the
Yeah.
bad part about that is
Yeah.
that they don't just hang around and do nothing. They actually release various toxic substances
Exactly.
that makes other cells around them become zombie cells as well. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of some nasty stuff. Um, so quercetin specifically seems to have some effect on that process. Um, I should point out too
Yeah.
that other than quercetin, there's also fisetin, which also seems to
Mm-hmm.
have a significant role. A lot of times you'll
Yeah.
hear about quercetin, fisetin, and resveratrol
Yeah.
because
In the
all
same
of them
category.
do sort of the same thing, where they have this role on senescence, but they
Mm-hmm.
also, they also seem to have this active role in stimulating the sirtuin pathway. Again, that's the geroprotection pathway.
Yeah.
Again, nothing there in the ITP. In fact, going back to resveratrol alone did not show any benefit in the
Right.
interventions training program. However, listen, I don't take quercetin right now, but it's certainly interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Quercetin, fisetin, if you're looking
Yeah.
at Senolytics,
Mm-hmm.
right? Senolytics, it probably makes sense for me to think about adding a senolytic to my regimen. What do you think?
Um, yeah. So if you're going to tackle anti-aging from multiple different levels, it actually does make sense to add a senolytic. Um, I think you're spot on. I think the idea of the zombie cells is enough to think hard about it. These zombie cells are very inflammatory. So we do know that inflammation has a multitude of issues behind it. And inflammation is one of the major drivers of aging and cognitive decline and, you name it. So taking the trash out, removing zombie cells does make sense. And I will add though, so, ITP didn't show any changes, right? Geroprotective. However, there are human trials going on now
Yeah,
with some of these senolytics, including Quercetin,
yeah,
and I think even at the Mayo Clinic too. So I would say
that's right.
stay
Quercetin,
tuned.
and it doesn't that one also have fisetin in it?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
They actually tend to come as a combination, if you see them over the counter. But I think we will know more soon. So again, use the word compelling. I think the risks and benefits are leaning. I mean, especially if cost isn't necessarily an issue. I'm not worried about this thing harming me. I actually do think it holds significant promise. So I would say stay tuned.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
stay tuned on that one
Hmm.
too, because the other thing is that I think quercetin, and I think this may have something to do with that Mayo study as well. It goes through the blood-brain barrier. I think there's a lot of
Hmm.
thought that this could have a role in, Alzheimer's disease,
Yeah. Interesting.
benefiting Alzheimer's disease and other things where there's actually protein aggregates in the brain causing neurodegeneration. So
Yeah.
quercetin, fisetin, stay tuned. Certainly not. I
Yeah.
wouldn't call that voodoo. I would call it again stuff to
Yeah.
think about. And I think in a big picture, it's like when I think about the supplements I'm taking, I think I need to go
Mhm.
through, periodic reevaluations of what I'm taking because
Yeah.
it's you don't want to take like 500 different things, right? But like if you're thinking
Correct.
like, why am I taking this? I'm taking this because I think it'll increase NAD. I'm taking this because, well,
Yeah.
we recently talked about taurine,
Hmm.
without you, but
I'll tune in.
yeah, and I'm taking this because I think I'd want my taurine to go up. I'm
Hmm.
taking this because as a senolytic, because I think senolytic should be part of my program, or that I really want to stimulate the sirtuin pathways. Like, I
Yeah.
think if you think about these kinds of things, you're going to end up with a regimen that's makes sense instead of
Just random.
just random stuff, which I mean,
Yeah.
it adds up. It's really challenging. I have to tell you.
Well,
It's yeah.
yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I see patients come in with supplement lists that are sometimes triple digits, over 100 supplements.
Wow.
And really what I look for is redundancy. So, to your point, if you pick the major categories and you choose one supplement or maybe one or two supplements within the major categories, and, I consider Senolytics to be a major category. Sometimes I see patients with like 10 or so antioxidants. And, um, I believe actually in one of our shows, we talked about Genova testing. Did we? Like the Genova NutrEval?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
No,
I
we
mean,
should
so,
though.
we talk about testing as sort of this medicine 3.0 concept, but one test that I find valuable is this Genova NutrEval test, blood test and urine test. And it looks at dozens of vitamins, it looks at a dozen or so antioxidants, and you can see high, low, high, low. And, kind of a rule of thumb is if you see several things that are low, it doesn't mean I need to add several supplements to my regimen. Antioxidants get consumed and you can fix that either by supplementing it or removing the source of oxidation. So sometimes there are lifestyle hacks that you can do to help boost these or dietary tweaks. But just kind of spin this back, when you're devising a supplement regimen, you want to highlight the major categories, and then if you add on one thing with some lifestyle modifications, you can retest, make it analytical, and see if all these things actually do balance. I'm kind of in the camp of rather than just, Hail Mary and dozens of supplements,
Mm.
make sure each one holds value. Mm,
Yeah, or at least think about it rationally. Don't just go 500 different things. It's just,
yeah.
The
Mm,
last one that
mm,
this particular person wants to know about is methyl B complex. Now, I have not seen methyl B complex necessarily as a geroprotective type of thing, but maybe indirectly, yes, because I mean, I'm on it
Yeah.
because I and maybe 30% of the population have a mutation
Yep.
called the MTHFR mutation.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
you can imagine how we remembered that in medical school, the
How did you remember it,
MTHFR.
Buck?
Anyway, so the MTHFR mutation, you want to talk a little bit about what that mutation is, because
Mm.
you probably see, I mean, are you seeing it at about 30%?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's not, I don't test it on the yearly blood work, but when you're dealing with genetics, you don't have to check it yearly. Genetics doesn't change. Epigenetics can. But the MTHFR gene regulates the methylation cycle, which, in layman's term is it's simply this cycle designed to create methyl groups or methyl donors to turn on and off proteins, switches, that sort of stuff. There are hundreds of reactions in the body that are methyl dependent.
Mm-hmm.
But one way
So
to,
what happens
yeah,
if you don't, what happens if you don't create enough methyls? Because I think,
yeah,
I mean,
a lot of different problems, right?
right.
Methyl groups are involved in hormonal regulation, depression, anxiety. It's involved in neuroprotection in a lot of different ways. I've never heard a correlation with geroprotection, to your point,
Yeah.
like extended survival, but it plays in heavily in health span without doubt. So, just and that, train of thought, methyl folic acid, so sort of like activated folic acid, as some people say, is important if you have a methylation genetic defect that predisposes you to a problem, a kink in that cycle.
Right.
Now, you did, not only did we check, if you I hope you don't mind me talking about
No,
your
no, no,
history,
please. No.
you were a heterozygote for the MTHFR gene, which doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a problem. You have two copies, it can
Yeah.
compensate.
By the way,
Yeah.
that's an important thing. Like, a lot of people in basics, like when they learn about biology and genetics, they say like, oh, it's like two positives, two negatives or whatever, and it makes it so black and white. The reality is that those genes are there. They're going to express some level of protein.
That's
And
right.
then, the question, if you're heterozygote, that means there's one normal, one's not normal, right? So, but
Yeah.
what did that do in my lab? What caused, so this,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
So you had the heterozygosity, yes, but not everybody has an issue. The second thing I look at is homocysteine,
right,
and your homocysteine level was high,
right,
which tells me that there's a break in the pathway.
right.
So we put you on that.
Okay, so when there's a break in the pathway, just so that people kind of
Yeah.
understand, you have this pathway that requires this MTHFR gene to work,
Yeah.
uh, and if it doesn't, you don't do a lot of the cellular methylation that you need to have healthy cells and all that.
Yeah.
There's a byproduct of malfunction there, and that is an increase in homocysteine, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the way I think of it, if you just imagine like a roller coaster that's spinning
Right,
around, and you put a rock in the track over here,
right.
you're going to get buildup right before the rock. And this is the buildup. It's
Is
homocysteine.
the homocysteine itself doing anything negative, or
Yeah,
is it just
good
something that you're
question.
seeing
It's
as
an
a byproduct
indicator.
indicator?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, don't quote me on that because I'd have to dig into it a little bit more, but I believe homocysteine is more of an indicator of problems. And it's correlated to increased atherogenesis,
yeah,
right? And stroke risk and all that stuff. But I don't think the homocysteine is causing damage. I think
right,
it's an indicator of a deeper problem.
right. So
Mm,
that's a really good point to
mm,
bring up. That again, these things that we're looking at, like it's not like you're always saying something's low, I need to make it high. What you're really trying to figure out is, um, is it indicative of something else going on in your body, right? So
yeah.
maybe you don't get genetic testing, but if you have high homocysteine levels,
Yeah.
there may be a good chance because 30% of the population has some kind of mutation in this gene. Now, why
Absolutely.
again? Why is it important though to fix? You mentioned it a little bit that that high homocysteine levels are associated, not cause
Yeah. Big difference.
a number of disease processes, and you talked about the cardiovascular ones.
Yeah, cardiovascular stroke. We're talking about blood vessel
Yeah,
diseases. We do know this,
yeah,
right? So that's a big one. So, to your point, why fix it? I mentioned hormones being another one. So patients that I can tell you that if a patient doesn't respond the way I would think to, that I think a response would be for a serotonin medication, Celexa or whatever. We can check the methylation cycle, and sometimes the solution is so simple. You put them on a methylated folic acid, and all of a sudden their response to these hormones improves. But there's a whole list of things
Response to the hormones,
to
the antidepressants.
correct, and
Oh,
then neurotransmitters balance.
interesting. So you're
Yeah,
saying that you've actually seen benefit in depression
yeah,
by
yeah,
getting by fixing these homocysteine levels by
yeah.
adding
Correct. Yes, correct.
methyl B complex.
Now, you could throw everybody in a methylfolic acid complex, and I think that's probably a waste of money.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but if you have a problem, use homocysteine as an indicator, then dive into it. And there's also a Genova. I mean, I'm not a rep for Genova, but there are a lot of different companies that do methylation testing. Mm,
This is the value
mm,
of medicine 3.0. We have
mm.
something that 30% of the population has a problem with. It
Yeah.
causes it
But yeah,
causes and is associated with multiple disease processes. And all you need to do is take one supplement, you fix the problem,
yeah, right.
right? This is what this whole medicine 3.0 thing
Yeah.
is about.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how important that is. Methyl B
Yeah.
complex, if your homocysteine is high, I don't care if you get the genetic testing or not. I mean, it's probably not a bad idea, not medical advice, but not a bad idea to take a methyl B complex. So, and
I love
again,
it.
just going back to
Yeah.
this idea of, okay, well, is it geroprotective or not? Well, probably not at this upstream level where we're talking about sirtuins and where we're
Hmm.
talking about all sorts of, cellular longevity mechanisms. But at this
Hmm.
low level where you have this dysfunction, that some people have this dysfunction that's making them higher risk for disease processes.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, it kind of is geroprotective for them because if they have
Yeah.
strokes early and cardiovascular disease early, then they're not going to live as long.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we had a whole episode about the low-hanging fruit.
Right. All right. Next question is from Nikki. And Nikki is asking this question. This was from, by the way, some people have been really nice. They've gone to our podcast feed on iTunes and they've given us 5-star reviews. And by the way, it would be lovely if you hit the subscribe button, give us a 5-star review of whatever you're doing. It certainly helps get the word out. If you think this is of value to other people, share it, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, this question is from Nikki, who wrote this question on the reviews itself, which came with 5
Hmm.
stars. The first one I will handle because I don't think you're going to know much about this topic, but she says, has the Kirk Cousins era with the Minnesota Vikings been successful? And I think, Nikki, that's a really good question. I think the problem with check down Kirk is that I think he is mechanically a very, very good player. Do you follow football?
I
No,
don't.
he's a very, very good quarterback. I think his stats are sometimes inflated because he plays for stats. The biggest thing
Mm.
about Kirk is like, and this is maybe hopefully a story that's changing over time, is that in the big games, he doesn't perform. He's like, when you see a guy like, he's like the opposite of Eli Manning, right? You know Eli
Of
Manning.
course,
So
yeah.
Eli Manning would suck all
Yeah.
year long.
And then he crushes it.
And then the playoffs would start. And then he would become Peyton Manning
Yeah.
in the playoffs and he'd go
Yeah.
win a Super Bowl.
Hmm.
Kirk is kind of the opposite. Historically, he's been the opposite. He goes from having a really great year, being one of the top guys in the league, and then he gets in his first playoff game and he just becomes Eli Manning from the regular season. So anyway, that's the answer there.
Hmm.
Okay, let me move on with her other comments and questions because she does have those and they're good. She says, amazing podcast. Been following your Wealth Formula podcast for a while and now Sapio. Huge fan. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. She says, couple questions. Want to see if you could dive a little bit deeper into the key differences as far as what you would recommend for women.
Mm.
More specifically, when talking about managing cholesterol. This is going to be for you, okay?
Mm.
Because this is all clinical stuff. As statins are generally not recommended for childbearing age, And also, when you talk about spikes when monitoring blood glucose, are you looking to avoid reaching certain numbers of blood glucose or just peaks in general? Okay, let's tackle the first one first, because this is really, and I have to be honest, I didn't really know that there was a lot of different issues for women on statins. So, pardon my
Yeah.
ignorance, everybody, because I'm only like, I don't practice. I'm an ex-surgeon. I don't know anything, but so go into this. What's the differences between how you treat men and women in this
Well,
space?
yeah, this is what it comes down to. It's that if you have someone that's got familial hypercholesterolemia, this is really what's getting at.
That's pretty rare though.
It's not super common, thank
No,
goodness,
right.
right? And you're a woman and you can't take statins, you can't take fibrates, you can't take niacin because all these things have been shown to be teratogenic. What do you do?
Teratogenic means
Yeah, potential for birth
thank you.
defects, right?
Thank you.
So that's problematic.
Thank you,
Yes.
doctor. Thank you, doctor. Big words.
I'm going to go with that.
So all these things have shown possibility of creating birth defects.
Right. It crosses the placenta.
Why why are you just talking about it in terms of familial hypercholesteremia
Because
though?
in the absence of a genetic defect that causes extreme numbers, most women or men, if you have slightly high, imagine if your LDL is 130 or so, it's not at target, you can withdraw it for 9 months or,
Right.
12 months, a few months
Right.
before, and you'd be fine. You focus on your diet, your activity, and you're fine. Now, and that's what a lot of women do. If you're on a statin and you're in a childbearing age, it usually infers that there's a problem, right? I mean, most men or women are not on statins in their 20s or 30s.
Right.
Right. So there's kind of the inference. Now, the question is, what do you do? And of course, you're going to focus on your lifestyle without question, right? But fish oil is fine. And that can modulate it can boost your HDL and lower your LDL. And then cholecystyramine. So these are a class of medications that inhibit absorption, right? I mean, they're very safe. That's been shown to be safe in pregnancy, right? So you have other options. But remember, the two things I said, number one, this is sort of a minority subset of patients where it's applicable. The hereditary cholesterol lipid problems are really the category, because if it's non-hereditary, then it's usually not that high and you can manage it in other ways. But if it is that high and you have a genetic predisposition, we generally use cholecystyramine or fish oil.
Is the difference between men and women, I mean, obviously once, you're postmenopausal, things start to, women become, their metabolic situation becomes similar to men. But
Yeah.
in young women, is it far less common, younger childbearing age women, are that age much less likely to have high cholesterol than men?
I see where your mind's at right
Yeah.
now. And, estrogen is protective.
Right.
And testosterone, we see this in men that have high testosterone, or if they're juicing, their cholesterol panels go up significantly, hence their coronary risk. So if
You're juicing, aren't you?
Oh, do I
you
look
like you're
it?
juicing.
It's the nicest
Anyway,
thing
go
you've said to me.
We'll go.
Oh,
So
you just made my day.
yeah, just kidding.
I wish I had a CGM on right now. But yes, yeah. So estrogen is protective. So women of childbearing age, women that have higher estrogen levels, are less likely to have hypercholesterolemia, especially if there's not a genetic explanation.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm just curious about that. Okay, so if you are, but what I'm gathering from you is that if you did have a woman of childbearing age who doesn't have off the charts, like crazy cholesterol, but high enough to treat, you just treat them until they say they're planning to get pregnant, and then you just stop.
Yeah.
Otherwise you do treat them the same way.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't
Right.
treat them any differently. But 3 months before pregnancy, that's when the statin has to come off.
Okay, got it. Now, the second question that she had is, when you talk about spikes when monitoring blood glucose levels, are you looking to avoid reaching certain numbers of blood glucose or just peaks in general?
Yeah.
Sort of one and the same, right? Like a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
You want me to take that, or do you want
no,
to
you take
comment?
it.
So yeah, they are one and the same. It's going to go up, but what we're really looking for is medicine 3.0 being glycemic optimization So we know it's going to go up and it's going to come down, especially if you're not diabetic and you have a normal insulin response, it's going to come down. But we're taking this to another level and we're saying we want to modulate that spike to under 140, 150. So, to answer that question, we do want to keep it in a narrow window, 100 to 140 or 150, ideally all times. And that might be a high task, but how do you achieve that? You go for, you would tackle it in multiple different ways. So metabolic optimization can be, and again, you might not like this, Buck, but we're optimizing all of our lifestyle measures, including alcohol, including activity, including the foods we eat, the dietary regimen that we bring in, our glycemic load, our stress levels. What does stress do? It mobilizes cortisol, and cortisol goes up, and then that can contribute to a higher than ideal spike. But medicine 2.0 is non-diabetic. Medicine 3.0 is a narrow window, 100 to 140 ideal.
I'm going to have to paraphrase this one because I think it was written. I just need to be careful here a little bit. But this gentleman would like to know, surprisingly, the gentleman would like to know why women's smell differently. I guess, in terms of that, that kind of thing. And if there's anything to do about it. So why don't you go clinical on me? Because you like to use words that work out and they're fair, like truncal obesity and things like that.
Adiposity.
Adiposity and truncal obesity. So why don't you address the question in a clinical way and answer it?
And we'll be sensitive, right? So obviously note, I'm not a gynecologist, right? But from an internal medicine standpoint, the things that are important to address.
Well, ask the question. What is he asking?
Well, the question is, why is there a smell down there?
Or for some women, why is their smell different? Is that?
So there are two parts to that, right? So there is a natural smell, right? This is not a sterile environment, especially the labia, the skin around. But the other question is, why can that smell differ or change? And that's when you start to look at pathology, right? So 101, so like gynecology 101, it is natural to have an odor down there, right? And that's in part by our natural bacterial power, right? Natural bacterial flora, lactobacillus being a heavy bacteria that's down there. There's a natural smell. Now, why can that become pathological? pH changes.
When you say pathological, what do you mean? Like extremely strong, different, all of the above?
So, or discharge.
Yeah.
So a different from the natural odor, a heavy odor, a fishy odor, or a discharge. And these things can truly indicate a bacterial overgrowth, which is classically known as bacterial vaginosis, or another problem like an STD, a urinary tract infection, or something you ate. To spin this to the men category, have you ever heard of asparagus affecting the smell down there for men? Right? And it's the same, that's true for women.
Yeah.
Right? So the first thing is, it is normal, right? Natural smells, and this is due to bacteria and sweat glands around the outside. And then the other side of it is, when is it pathological and when is it abnormal? And that has to do with overgrowth, pH changes, or things like that, or food items.
Is there, I mean, I guess, just as a follow-up, if you're a woman and you want to change something, or, you're concerned and maybe it's, what do you do about that?
Well, obviously, come on in. We'll do a full evaluation, right? We'll ask you the right questions. But there is a test you can do. It's called an A-firm test, which we do.
What is it called?
It's called an A-firm test.
A-firm?
Yeah, A-firm. It's
A-F-I-R-M?
Double F.
Affirm. Affirm. That's like an East Coast thing that you say A-firm?
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
I also say Gallery for some reason.
Yeah.
But maybe it's a firm.
I say potato. Just kidding.
Right?
Okay.
So you talk to them and find out, is this a problem? And if you do suspect a problem, then you go in there and you test. And you can test and you can rule out pathology, including infections, bacterial vaginosis, overgrowth. You can that's a test that I do most often. There are some doctors that will literally look at a sample on a microscope slide, right? I mean, those are the kind of the hardcore clinicians, scientists, and look for certain types of cells called clue cells for bacterial vaginosis. But I hope that answers your question. So to our women audience, it's not abnormal by any means. Don't think you're abnormal by any means. But if it's different from your normal, then come see us and we check it out.
Next question says, hi, Buck. I've been following you for a while, and I appreciate this new podcast you're doing. What's the point of achieving financial freedom if you don't have long-term health to enjoy it, right? Amen. My question is pretty basic, but a very confusing one for most people, I feel. What are the top daily supplements you like for longevity? Maybe include dosage and where do you specifically get them? The second part of the question is the hardest for me. There's so many supplement companies out there, and it's hard to tell who the true good guys are versus the one selling snake oil. Thank you for what you do. So I'm not going to get into a comprehensive thing on all of the different supplements I take and why and all that, because it would take a long time. But I'll just name a few, and but in terms of where to get them, again, I would recommend probably looking at consumerlab.com or I think you have some suggestions on that too. But I do take some vitamin D because I need it. I do take a little bit of glutathione. Methyl Protect is a brand of that methyl. What is it? The methyl folate complex, right?
Activated folic
The
acid.
folate complex. That's what we talked about earlier with the glutathione.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about earlier when we were talking about homocysteine levels and how I have this mutation, the MTHFR gene. So if you have that problem, you might want to consider this Methyl Protect brand. I also take omegas. I take omegas and phosphatidylserine that they're basically brain vitamins. So those are just a few. Maybe we'll do some shows specifically talking about each ones at some other point. But do you have any comments on, other than the consumerlab.com that I just mentioned is a good resource? It is a paid resource, which is, not ideal. But what are your comments on these things?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I wasn't aware of that website. Most of the information I have is from looking through the data that I get from reps and then also other physicians, naturopaths, integrated medicine physicians heavily. A lot of internal medicine doctors don't necessarily buy into the vitamin thing as much as I'd like to. But so a few reputable brands, Nordic Naturals makes a great fish oil product. And then I think that might be the one that you're on. So Nordic Naturals is known for the fish oil, very, very highly potent, very, very pure.
And by the way, one thing with Nordic Naturals, this is important. You gotta, once you open that bottle, it's gotta be in the fridge.
Yeah.
Because it'll start to stink.
See, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And I've had patients purchase Nordic Natural products on Amazon, which is what I hinted at before, and their numbers don't budge. Right? Is it even working? Is it pure? Is it, like literally these things
What's
have
wrong
a
with the
shelf
Nordic
life.
Naturals off of Amazon?
Well,
It's the same
we just
brand.
don't know the storage conditions for these things. And that's kind of, I had one patient that got violently ill after starting a supplement. It wasn't Nordic Naturals, but it was an online supplement. And so these things have shelf life. They have, optimal storage conditions as well.
Well, how do you determine that?
Well, I usually recommend to buy it straight from the distributor or from our local pharmacies and look at the expiration date. But, knowing where your products come from, it's almost like food, right? You kind of want to know where your food comes from too.
Yeah.
That could be a topic in itself too.
Yeah.
But
Well, it gets really complicated then, right? I mean, and then both of us are, we do take NMN products, and that's another one that should be refrigerated. And
correct.
And people don't typically talk about refrigerating these things, right?
Yeah, and for patients that use gut health products and probiotics, prebiotics, that kind of stuff, many of them require refrigeration as well, because these are live cultures. Although some formulations actually are stable outside for X period of months, but you can kind of see that it's more complicated than some people might recognize. But number one, Nordic Naturals is a great one. Orthomolecular is another very popular one, very pure, high potency product. Designs for Health is a very popular one, and they have a really great, this is one product that I use. They have a really great multivitamin that has 5,000 international units of vitamin D in it as well. So you kind of get, double bang for your buck. Most multivitamins don't. And I use it as a good foundation. Pure Encapsulations is the last one that's very popular and has great products. So again, I'm not endorsing any of those. Talk to your doctor. Not all of them are like including vitamin D. You hinted at this though too. you don't want to just start popping pills. You want to be
Yeah.
analytical about it, especially for the non-water soluble ones like vitamin D,
Yeah.
and see where you're at.
Yeah. I mean, for
Yeah,
stuff like that, you got to be careful because I mean, I actually take vitamin D because I have a vitamin D deficiency.
correct.
Which is odd because it seems like everybody I talk to in Montecito has a vitamin D deficiency. It's
Isn't
so
that
weird.
bizarre?
It is
Yeah,
because it's super sunny and everybody's outside all the time,
yeah,
right?
I know, I know. Well,
Um,
don't forget that vitamin D has, your active form of vitamin D, and then there's 125
yeah.
vitamin D, but you have to have good kidney health, and you also have to have appropriate sunshine.
And it's also
Yeah.
vitamin D3 typically
There's
with
D2,
K.
there's D3.
So do you want
Yeah.
to do D3 with K typically?
Yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
point. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
vitamin K is a great adjunct that modulates how your vitamin D is utilized. Too many big words.
No, no, no. It's all good. Utilized is a word that I think most of us know. It's when you talk about a teratogen or something like that, when that's when we have to like cut
My
you off.
apologies.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, I don't want to get too specific on this show because I think it's a big task to go
Mhm.
through everyone, but I'm happy to do it. I don't actually. One of my whole pet peeves and when I've been like reading or listening to other people
Mhm.
in this space is that for some reason they don't want to completely reveal,
What they're
exactly what
using.
they're on or what they're, where they get it from. I don't know. I'm happy to do that on another
Hmm.
episode, and we might just do that like sort of as running episodes with me. Just I can just tell you what I'm up to, and
That's great. And
yeah, I
how it
think
changes over time
it
too.
changes over time. And, for example, I just added taurine. I keep forgetting about that. Added a
Hmm.
taurine supplement based on that study that came. Did you see that study in Science on taurine?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I did. In fact, I mean, I'm blessed. A lot of my patients actually engage me in these dialogues. One of the ways that I
Yeah.
kind of stay up. But yeah, I had a patient that sent me that article.
Yeah.
Mm.
And what's your take on it?
Well,
We did a whole show on it, but I'm curious in your,
yeah, I mean, I found it extraordinarily compelling. I mean, really to show the correlation between taurine and aging. And as we get older, our taurine levels go down,
yeah.
right? I mean, almost analogous to the way you brought up
NAD.
NAD.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a very similar thing. And what I thought was interesting, I have not actually seen an NAD study that is designed the same way. I would love to see that. I
It's a
would
good,
love to see
yeah,
that. And it's kind of odd because, the NR and NMN products are multi-billion-dollar products. They
right.
don't have these kinds of things. But, there is, I have heard some criticism on that study about like how, maybe animals don't naturally make it as much as humans do, so they're a little bit different and all that stuff. But
Mm,
again, that to me is one that the downside seems extremely low. And if you have multiple animal models that are showing
mhm.
benefit,
Yeah, there you go.
gosh, that
Yeah,
seems pretty compelling. That study I thought was done pretty well. I mean,
yeah,
compared to other stuff. I mean, you
yeah.
can you can sit there and talk about how things are snake oil because there's not a randomized clinical human trial that would take about 100 years to do, but that's the whole
Yeah,
point, right? Like we can't do that, so we're trying
yeah,
to like riff off of some of the data that's coming from other animal models. I think that's
yeah.
it for our questions, but I wanted to just see, Ben, if you had any questions. I know you were dressed up for uh, Canada Day appropriately in what looks like you're going out to barbecue and drink beer, like Canadian beer. So we won't put your face or your body on camera because you've got a maple leaf on your on your shirt. But do you have any questions like or thoughts on anything that we've talked about or not even talked about?
Yeah, I do have questions. First one is there five, universal vitamins or supplements that everybody should be taking, or is that kind of too much to ask?
Yeah, I mean, five might be heavy for a core, for like a foundation. I mean, I honestly think that a good multivitamin and a multivitamin with vitamin D and magnesium, which good ones do have, including the one I mentioned, I think that's a foundation. And I think it's pretty safe to say that something in the antioxidant category could be foundational. And that could be CoQ10, that could be glutathione, that could be curcumin. Quercetin as well, which is an antioxidant, also senolytic. I think that category is very high value. What other categories do you think?
Well, so you talked about Senolytics. You go back to that whole quercetin, fisetin, resveratrol, spermidine's in that too.
Spermidine is in there.
Spermidine's in that. So I
Yeah.
think trying to determine whether if you're looking at a senolytic, that might be something to consider. But I want to go back to your question though, because I don't think that there really is something that everybody should be on per se. I think this is ultimately like, if you buy into the science and you're thinking about these things, then if you believe that there's a role for senolytics and you want to be on one, then maybe consider maybe quercetin, fisetin.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, but I see your point. I
you
mean,
know what I
it's
mean?
very
Like
individualized.
there's not really like things that everybody should be on. I mean, I think the things that people should be on a regular basis are things that are not normal in their blood. So, for example, if your vitamin D is low, which it is in a lot of people, I think being on a good, vitamin D3K product is a good idea. So you get those levels up. We talked about, probably B vitamins because especially if
Yeah,
you've got an MTHFR
yeah,
mutation like I do, that's one that you should be on. I mean,
yeah. But it
like,
comes down to blood work.
right, it's
Yeah,
blood work and trying to fix the things that are low hanging fruit in your
yeah,
own blood work. I think that's where I would start, is things that you should absolutely be on. Beyond that, I think you have to start looking at it as, what do I buy? What mechanisms am I trying to stimulate? I think you look at like a
that's
guy
fair.
like David Sinclair, for example, and we've talked about, this smart guy,
Mm,
and I wondered to myself, after the resveratrol not passing through the ITP and creating a longevity effect, why he would be on that. But I think the reason that he is because he's convinced that if you get into this pathway of quercetin, fisetin, and resveratrol,
mm,
that there might be some sort of advantage, because all of them are ultimately, well, quercetin and fisetin are senolytics, but resveratrol all of them seem to have an effect on the sirtuin pathways. So
yeah, there's your
he's
theme.
convinced that the sirtuin pathways are critically important. So he evidently takes all three of those. And so
Hmm.
I think you have to like think about it. I mean, you may want to follow some of these, various other people in the space like David Sinclair. I mean, it's not like I agree 100% on everything what anybody says, but find out the reasoning and make some decisions for yourself.
Okay, and just a little refresher because we've got a bunch of great episodes already. How much sleep do I need again?
Mm. Well, 8 hours, a lot of data shows that even seven, yeah, is just insufficient.
Isn't there sleep
Yeah,
chronotypes though, where like some people need more, a little
I
bit more,
know.
a little bit less? I mean,
Yeah,
everybody needs like at least seven, or
yeah.
like 6.5, 7, but isn't there
Well,
different chronotypes
yeah,
there?
there are people that that don't intrinsically feel the need to do 8 hours, or that they can't do 8 hours. They're staring at the ceiling. But what I would piggyback off of that would be, are they as optimized as they could be? Just because they don't feel like there is a need, is there a functional benefit by expanding their sleep pattern? But I mean, a lot of good research shows that we constantly value sleep, undersleep, and that 7 to 8 hours should be the gold standard.
Can you remind me again the name of the blood test that you do that you recommend for all your patients?
Yeah, I mean, really, I place tremendous value in the Genova NutrEval. And again, this is kind of dominated by integrative docs and naturopathic doctors classically, but I've probably done 100 or so of these, and it breaks down your B vitamins, it breaks down your antioxidants, it shows sort of the cyclin pathways, it shows how your methylation pathways are they unhealthy? It infers gut health, it looks at some basic toxins that you can modulate, pull back, avoid, including mercury. But it's a really good, what I call foundational study to personalize someone's regimen. I mean, there's another category in there, by the way, for omegas. So you're on a good omega-3 from Nordic Naturals. Not all my patients need it, right? So, I mean, Medicine 3.0 is giving somebody a personalized recommendation pick list. So I find it valuable.
Cool.
Mm,
Well, I think that is
mm,
that's enough for today. Thanks for joining us again, and
yeah,
obviously, we're going to continue to have you on,
always a pleasure.
and it's always fun to talk to you. So that
Yeah.
is it for this episode of Sapio with Buck Joffrey. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.